I'm Tremper Longman. I'm the Robert H. Gundry Professor of Biblical Studies at Westmont College, and I have a PhD from Yale in Ancient Near Eastern Languages and Literature.
And my name is Chuck DeGroat. I'm a pastor on staff at City Church San Francisco, and I'm the academic dean of the Wilberforce Fellowship and the New Begin Theological Seminary Project, and I hold a PhD in psychology. And we're glad that you're joining us for this interview. We want to have an informal chat about some issues ranging from biblical studies to Christian spirituality to the importance of seminary and even the importance of something we call the Wilberforce Fellowship. And so I've got some questions for Tremper, and I wanted to begin with a book that you wrote, it must be 10, 15 years ago now, The Cry of the Soul. One of my favorite books. I was a student in seminary at the time when I first read this. And it changed my categories because it invited me to see all of Scripture, even the messy parts of Scripture. And I want to read a quote from this and then just ask you about it. You say that emotion links our internal and external worlds. To be aware of what we feel can open us up to questions we would rather ignore. All emotion opens us up to the nature of reality. And when you say that, I'm assuming that what you mean is that we often try to escape reality. And I remember reading that thinking, I live in the suburbs and pull into a garage every day. I try to escape reality. I try to escape the mess of my wife and my children. What's been the reaction to Cry of the Soul? What have you heard from people?
Well, obviously, you get mixed reactions to things like that. But one reaction is kind of a hunkering down and the idea that it's not just a suburban thing, it's also a church thing. You know, there's this sentiment that our emotions are problematic, troublesome, something to repress or deny. And but then on the other hand, there have been a number of people who have sort of welcomed the invitation to not simply repress emotions or simply to express them without reflection, but to think about emotions, to think about how emotions sort of help us know about our relationship with God and our relationship with other people.
Yeah, it strikes me that that's what I've heard from people is that this is the kind of book that cuts against the self-help spirituality that you often hear in the church. And so many of you have probably been to churches where you hear about 3 steps to this and 7 steps to that. And the Bible is sort of boiled down to this kind of pop spirituality or pop psychology. So what I'm interested in is that when I read a book like Cry of the Soul, it seems to open me up to or help me to access parts of myself that I haven't accessed before, but it also requires me to ask questions about the world I live in. Now we live in San Francisco in an urban environment. It's complex. We live in an ever more complex world. So when you think about Cry of the Soul, you talk about accessing emotions like anger. You talk about biblical lament. How do you see these kinds of things impacting sort of a richer spirituality as the world becomes more complex, as people realize that the mess that we're in?
Well, I mean, those words are good words, complexity and messiness. And we really do live in such a world, and by listening to our emotions, we come into better touch with how we're doing with God. And my role, of course, in that project was to point to the Psalms as a vehicle to help us both articulate, but also not only do the Psalms help us articulate our emotions, but they also minister to us. They in the sense that, you know, let's say we're in the depths and we're really struggling with troubles in our life. It just doesn't leave you there. It also sort of pushes you toward God. But again, you know, modern life, and especially modern urban life, well, not especially modern urban life, suburban life, country life, it's all full of trouble. And so again, rather than repressing and not listening, we should think and think through our emotions.
Yeah. So the Bible actually invites us to open ourselves to the reality
Yeah,
of the world around
right,
us and the world
right.
inside of us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it hurts, of course. That's one reason why we try to repress those emotions, or we find ourselves hurting others, and that's why we shouldn't simply act on our emotions. If you get angry, you know, the Psalms aren't giving you sort of the invitation to go and smack somebody,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or yell
Yeah.
at them.
Yeah.
It's but after thinking about it, you know, after thinking about the situation, it may lead you to go and say to a person, speak very harsh words to them
Yeah.
or whatever. It's
Yeah.
but you do so after thinking about it, not just impulsively.
Yeah. 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 So, okay, so it seems to me that the church has two reactions then to this. On the one hand, you have churches that go in the direction of this kind of fortress mentality,
Yeah.
where the world is messy and we're going to kind of keep that mess out. Because if we engage that, we go down the slippery slope to places where our emotions may take us,
Yeah.
even to liberal theology and things like that, right? On the other side, and I see this sometimes with the emergent church, you see this embrace, this sort of postmodern embrace of messiness and uncertainty, and we're going to be in it, we're going to live the tension. And it seems to me that both extremes, sort of the fortress mentality and the accommodationist mentality, don't work. And so I assume that you're sort of cutting through the middle of that, and you're not going to either extreme.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the reasons why the latter, that is the more emergent, as you described, the emergent church, I think that's why that's developed, is because our churches haven't developed a good liturgy or ritual of expression of emotion, even in our hymns, which is, you know, one of the places which is so has so much possibility. You know, Christian hymns rarely embrace the rawness of life, and I do think we need to develop more hymns that, for those occasions where corporately or individually we're suffering, and we just need to express that.